The Dolmuş is a true staple of public transport in Turkey. Whether you're in Istanbul, Ankara or Kahramanmaraş, if you want to get around cheaply, there's probably a Dolmuş not too far away. Deeply rooted in Turkish culture, it's been featured in films and even celebrated in songs. While many people appreciate this unique form of transportation, others see it as outdated and humble. A system that should be replaced with buses just like in Europe, to quote Kadir Topbaş, former mayor of Istanbul. What's clear though is that today many people in Turkey still rely on the Dolmuş. In many places it's the only form of public transportation available. For visitors from other countries, taking a ride can be a completely new and unusual experience, just like the whole system itself. That's why in this video we're going to take a closer look at how the Dolmuş emerged, how it works and what its future might look like. Welcome to Mobility Minded. Istanbul in the early 1930s. The Great Depression had hit Turkey hard, and many people were struggling to make a living. Around that time, a few car owners started working as taxi drivers to earn some extra money. To make their service more affordable, they began taking several passengers at once. People heading in the same direction could share the ride and split the fare. And that's how the first Dolmuşes were born. The idea of sharing rides actually came from the boats crossing the Bosporus. Back then, it was common practice to wait until a boat was full before setting off across the strait. That's also where the Dolmuş got its name, because in Turkish, Dolmuş literally means filled. In the years and decades that followed, the government introduced several regulations to bring some order to this rather chaotic system. In 1939, for example, the city of Istanbul passed a law requiring Dolmuş cars to have a license and introducing standardized fares. It also stated that drivers had to be over 25 years old, married, and of good reputation. During the Second World War, from 1939 to 1945, the Dolmuş remained a local phenomenon limited mostly to Istanbul. Expansion wasn't possible at the time due to fuel shortages and the general ban on imports. After the economic recovery of 1946 and with growing urbanization, the demand for mobility started to rise rapidly. That's why, in the late 1940s and 1950s, several cities across Turkey adopted the Dolmuş system from Istanbul, led by Ankara and Izmir. By the 1960s and 1970s, the Dolmuş had already become a well-established part of urban life, and the first interurban routes began connecting smaller towns and villages. In 1970, the term Dolmuş Hattı, which means Dolmuş Line, was officially mentioned for the first time in the national traffic regulations issued by the Ministry of Transport. Since then, the Dolmuş has been an essential part of Turkey's public transport system, found in nearly every city across the country. Since the 1980s, the Dolmuş system was continuously improved, with better organization of drivers and routes, improved technical standards, and in some places even electronic payment systems. Still, those standards can vary a lot from one region to another. It's actually pretty hard to define exactly what a Dolmuş is, but I've tried my best, cause this is not a quiz. Basically, there are two main types of Dolmuş in Turkey. First, the classic Dolmuş. This is a shared taxi that follows a fixed route but only starts once all seats are taken. The fare is charged per person, not per ride, which means that in a smaller vehicle with 4 passengers, each person pays a bit more than in a larger one with 6. This was the original form of the Dolmuş, which first appeared in the 1930s in Istanbul. It's still quite popular today in major cities, especially on short but highly frequented routes. Many countries around the world have similar types of shared taxis, from the Furgon in Albania, the Colectivo in Peru, and the Jeepney in the Philippines, to the Marshrutka in Russia. The differences are often quite small. It's usually a taxi following a fixed route where you can hop on and off whenever you like. Does your country also have something like this? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to learn about it. And don't forget to subscribe. Otherwise, we'll probably never hear from each other again. But now, back to Turkey, where we'll take a look at the second type of Dolmuş. The second type is the minibus Dolmuş. It's quite similar to a regular bus, but still much more flexible. These vehicles follow fixed routes and usually run on a set timetable. The fare is either fixed or depends on how far you travel. The biggest difference compared to a normal bus is the smaller size of the vehicle and the fact that you can get on and off almost anywhere along the route. This type of Dolmuş emerged during the 1950s and 60s, when travel demand was growing rapidly. Today, it's mostly found in smaller towns and rural areas. In many regions, though, a clear distinction between the two types isn't really possible. There are plenty of systems that mix elements of the classic Dolmuş with features from the minibus Dolmuş. One place that instantly comes to my mind here is the coastal town of Didim. Here, the lines are numbered and fixed, and there are set departure times. But the timetable isn't as reliable as you might expect from a minibus. As a foreigner, it can be pretty tricky to see through. When I visited the city myself, I did my best to navigate the system. Along the way, I had a few experiences that I'd like to share with you, so you'll know exactly what to expect and how to use it. Taking a ride on a Dolmuş isn't hard, once you know how it works. You can hop on pretty much anywhere along the route. If you see one coming, just wave at the driver so he knows you want to get on. Don't be surprised if he honks or flashes his lights to get your attention. Figuring out where a Dolmuş actually goes can be a bit tricky though. There usually aren't any route maps available. Instead, just keep an eye out for Dolmuş stops. They appear fairly often along the route. Sometimes it's a proper sheltered bench, and sometimes it's just this tiny sign by the roadside. Once you're on board, grab onto something immediately. The driver won't wait for you to find your balance before taking off. And with Turkey's driving style and the sometimes rather bumpy roads, you'll be glad you did. When you've got a secure stance, it's time to pay. The price list is usually displayed somewhere inside, with fares typically between 20 and 40 lira per person. You hand the money directly to the driver, who'll give you change right away. If the Dolmuş is full and you can't reach the driver, just pass your money to the person in front of you. It'll make its way to the front and your change will come back the same way. If you're traveling with more people, just tell the driver how many when handing over the fare. İki kişi means 2 people, üç kişi 3 and 4 kişi 4. When you've reached your destination, you'll need to let the driver know you want to get off. While some drivers announce major stops along the route, it's best not to rely on that. Keep your eyes open so you don't miss your stop. When it's time to get out, just say "İnecek var" and the Dolmuş will stop at the next safe location. You can also tell the driver your destination at any time during the ride, followed by "Lütfen." All of this might sound pretty easy, and it is. But what's not always easy is actually finding a Dolmuş going in your direction. The Dolmuş network in Didim, for example, is one of those mixed systems between the classic and the minibus version. With a bit of research, I managed to find a timetable online that showed the earliest and latest departures for each line, as well as how often they supposedly run. So, I basically had to calculate the full schedule myself. But honestly, that didn't even help much, because most of the time, those departure times turned out to be completely inaccurate. It seemed like Dolmuşes often left earlier or later depending on how full they were. Unfortunately, that made the whole system a bit unreliable, and waiting up to an hour wasn't unusual during my vacation. The taxi advertisement at the stop speaks for itself. I heard rumors about a phone number you could call to check the current timetable, but I couldn't find anything about it online. In my opinion, a call service like that would make perfect sense and would improve the Dolmus system tremendously. Actually, that's my biggest criticism overall: the lack of information. The system itself is quite solid and definitely something worth building upon. Just a few small improvements could make it so much better. So, how could this be achieved? In my opinion, it's time to make a decision. Should the Dolmuş in Didim operate as a classic Dolmuş or as a minibus Dolmuş? If the choice is to go with the classic Dolmuş, a few simple steps could already make a big difference. First, draw the routes on a map, print them, and display them at every stop. Next, set up a hotline where people can call to find out when the next Dolmuş is arriving. And of course, put that number at the stops as well. Ideally, all of this information should also be available online. If the decision goes in favor of the minibus Dolmuş, the steps are quite similar. Again, draw the routes, print them, and put them up at the stops. But this time, also create proper timetables showing all departure times for each stop. Once again, that information should also be accessible on a website. And that's really it. With just these few simple and inexpensive improvements, the Dolmus system in Didim could reach an entirely new level, becoming much more reliable, transparent, and accessible for both locals and visitors alike. A good and reliable public transport system would be an important step forward for Turkey. The country is still very car-centric, with about 90% of all passenger transport happening on the road. And while the Dolmuş alone won't solve this issue, it's an important first step, a foundation for offering a real alternative to owning a car. With just a few quick and inexpensive improvements, the Dolmuş could become exactly that. A simple, accessible and reliable way to get around. Maybe that could help make people in Turkey just a little less dependent on their cars. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. And if you want to learn more about different transit systems or urban mobility in general, make sure to subscribe. So we will meet each other again in the next video. See you there.